Alright, what is up YouTube? Back at it again with another Dead or Alive fighting game discussion video. Today I actually wanted to talk about Dead or Alive 6 and, kind of where this idea comes from that Dead or Alive 6 is a bad game. Because yes, I did not enjoy the game as much as Dead or Alive 5. But to say that Dead or Alive 6 is a bad game might be a bit of a stretch. And I got a lot of comments on my Dead or Alive reboot video where I talked about things that I would like to see in the Dead or Alive reboot, and people saying, oh, Dead or Alive 6 is a bad game, etc., and why they think Dead or Alive 6 is a bad game. So yeah, I'm gonna get into my experiences with Dead or Alive 6 and why I personally don't feel like it's as good of a game as Dead or Alive 5, but why by no means of the imagination do I think it's a bad game. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so first and foremost, I'm gonna just destroy this argument that I saw in the comments. Someone said like Dead or Alive 6 is a bad game because they tried to nerf the sex appeal and stuff like that, and I'm like, no. If you think Dead or Alive 6 is a bad game because they tried to nerf or tone down the sex appeal from 5, then like, bro, you're in the wrong, okay? Like that's just cap. That is just cap. Like honestly, the reason why I personally don't like Dead or Alive 6 as much as I like Dead or Alive 5 is because of the content in the game. I feel like Dead or Alive 5 has so much more there, so much more going for it, right? Like they have tag mode. All the stages in Dead or Alive 5 are so much more well thought out, right? Like first off, there's a lot more stages in Dead or Alive 5 than there are 6. And those stages are a lot more interesting than the stages in Dead or Alive 6. There's a lot more interactables and interactions you can do with those stages. They're a lot better designed. They look a lot prettier. Like even the stages that are in 5 that also are in 6 look better in 5 somehow. Like that one Chinese festival stage that goes into a cliffhanger that goes into the bottom, which is like a Tokyo street neon sign like stage. That stage to me looks a lot better in 5 than it does in 6. And it's kind of weird because in 6, you can tell like obviously the colors are a lot more vibrant. There's fireworks on the ground, so you would think there's more going on in that stage in 6, but in actuality I just feel like in 5 it's a lot more grittier and it just feels a lot more like a street fight at night, like in the city in 5 than it does in 6. And it just, I don't know, like to me I just love that aspect. I love that tone and that grit of that stage in 5 as opposed to 6 where it feels so like fabricated or plastic, like everything. Yeah, there's fireworks on the stage and yeah, that's I guess kind of cool, but it just, I don't know, it doesn't work for me. I just don't like it. I really don't like it. I feel like 5 nailed it, 6 just tried to copy it and put something there to like make it new, but it just doesn't feel like the love went into 6 the way it did to 5, and I think that is what really makes 6 not as great of a game as 5, is overall everything about the way DOA 6 was made just doesn't feel like the love and the passion went into making that game the way it did for 5, 4, and every other title in the franchise. 6 just feels like it has that copy and paste, like, oh, let's just make this and make a quick buck, cash grabby kind of feel to it. And that's what I hate about DOA 6 the most, is that a lot of the content in DOA 6 feels like it's just rehashed from 5, but with way less effort, way less love put into it, The fact that, hey, Rachel costs money now, the fact that Momiji costs money now, a lot of their costumes that were in 5 now cost money for 6, and it's just like, oh, they're just trying to make a quick buck off of us and reusing content from 5 that we already had for free in that game. That to me is the sole aspect that makes 6 not as good as 5. But yeah, by no means of the imagination do I feel like Dead or Alive 6 is a bad game. Dead or Alive 6 is one of the only games that I've ever pre-ordered, and I think it's because around that time, it was the summer, no other games were really coming out. I was like, oh, I want something to do, I had the money to buy it, so I was like, why not, right? Like another Dead or Alive game. I love Dead or Alive 5, so like, why not, right? The game looked really good from what I remember seeing in the trailers and stuff like that, so I was like, why not? I pre-ordered the game, I bought it, got that deluxe edition with like the extra costumes and stuff like that. When I started playing the game when it came out, I liked it, I liked it. I wasn't really a fan of the DOA quest mode per se, and all the grinding that you had to do to unlock costume parts to then buy them with in-game money, which was kind of weird. Didn't really like that, not gonna lie, but it wasn't necessarily a bad game, right? Like if we compare it to something like Street Fighter 5 on release, that was a bad game. That was a terrible game. I think for Capcom to release Street Fighter 5 in the state that it was in for $60 was just criminal, right? And I don't think that DOA 6 could ever be compared to the lows of that game. right? Like I think DOA 6 at least had content there. We had things to do. We had a story mode. It wasn't great. It wasn't good by any means, but we had a story mode. Like a story mode was there. We had DOA quest mode. Was it great? Not really, but again, it was there, something to do, right? And the game ran smooth. The game functioned well, you know, unlike Street Fighter V on release. So it wasn't a bad game. And if we're still looking at it as a Dead or Alive game, like in comparison to the other games, yes, there is a lack of love and a lack of detail that went into the stages and everything, but at the same time, it is still a quality fighting game, and I do play it a lot to this day just because it's a good game. It's not a bad game. Like, yes, in comparison, it's not as detailed, it's not as much content provided, but it's still a good game. By no means is it a bad game, and I was just really kind of annoyed seeing people saying like, oh, DOA 6 is a bad game because of this, because of that, and I'm like, no. DOA 6 is not as great as the others because of, again, the things that I mentioned, but I wouldn't call it a bad game necessarily. I mean, if it was a bad game, I wouldn't still play it to this day, you know? And yeah, I don't know. I kind of wanted to, you know, just let my thoughts out about that because I'm starting to see this like stigma that, oh, DOA 6 is a bad game, and I don't think that it's a bad game. I think we got to stop saying DOA 6 is a bad game and start saying that, you know, they could have handled it better, right? Like the way they decided to handle support of the game post-launch was also really bad decision, right? And a lot of the content that we got was just a ton of costumes, you know, and just a ton of stuff that really didn't help or fix the game in any way, right? We did get a few new characters like Tamaki. A lot of it was just a lot of costumes, and a lot of those costumes were just from 5, and it's just like, I don't know, it just felt really underwhelming to me. And again, that's where I feel like DOA 6 flops, is that the support for the game and just overall most of the content in the game is just rehashing from 5, but way less dynamic, way worse, way less interesting, and it's like, why are we paying for this, you know? Them adding hairstyles to the game, like that's a cool idea, but making you pay for it and all that, like it's just, it was a mess, right? But if you just buy DOA 6, you know, the game by itself, and you don't get any of that stuff, I still feel like you have a good game in your hands, right? Like you have a good looking game. Like DOA 6 looks amazing. It looks really good. It still looks and runs really good. You still have a good game in your hands without all that extra BS and extra DLC content. I still have yet to buy the extra characters like Rachel and Momiji. Even though I loved playing them in 5, I refuse to buy them in 6, but I digress. That's why I don't like 6 as opposed to the other games in the franchise. But by no means is it a bad game. Alright, post-editing Mondy chiming in here, I just wanted to mention a few things that I actually didn't mention in the initial recording of this video. Because while I was editing, I realized I didn't exactly make my point of Dead or Alive 6 being not a bad game as much as I wanted to. I talked a lot about why I didn't like 6 as much as 5, but I didn't actually get to mention a lot of the things that I loved about Dead or Alive 6. Therefore, I wasn't exactly making the best argument of why it's actually a good game. First, let me just say that I think every fighting Dead or Alive game in the franchise has been a really good game. Like taking away Dead or Alive Extreme and all those other side games and everything, if we're strictly just talking about the fighting games of Dead or Alive 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I feel like every single game in the franchise has been really well done, really well made, and is a good quality product. It's just overall, all these games are so much fun, and I love them. I really do love them. I love this franchise so much, and I feel like it is so underrated, so underlooked, and it pains me that it's not as popular as other fighting game franchises because it's just so much fun. The characters are just so cool, and I love it. I really do. So I definitely wanted to mention that here because Dead or Alive 6 is no exception. I love Dead or Alive 6. The game is a lot of fun, just like every other game in the franchise. All these games are great. I don't think Dead or Alive has a single bad game in its franchise, in its series, and that is honestly a pretty big statement, right? A lot of fighting game franchises have a lot of titles, and you know, there's bound to be one that just everyone's like, but I really think that the Dead or Alive series has all great games. I'm definitely going to make a different video where I talk about how this series is so underrated because I think that as a fighting game franchise, the game's really well balanced. There's a lot of cool characters. They've always looked really good. You know, there's just so many reasons, but yeah, I just wanted to, for the sake of this video, mention the fact that I like all the games. All the games are great, and I don't think Dead or Alive has had a bad game, period. And then yeah, I mentioned in the video also about Street Fighter V and how that was a bad release initially. Just to further elaborate on that, right? Street Fighter V, when it initially released, was such garbage, right? The survival mode was so ass, and it was like kind of broken, right? Whereas in Dead or Alive 6's survival mode, it was actually, you know, pretty well made, pretty well done, right? I mean, it's pretty hard to mess up a survival mode in a fighting game, but somehow Street Fighter V did, and Dead or Alive 6 did not, right? All the Dead or Alive 6 modes that, you know, we expect the game to have on release, they all work, they all function, and that's good. Like, I just want you guys to know how bad fighting games can get. Like, none of the modes in Street Fighter V worked, like, at all. It was just so bad, and even when they did work, all the bullshit you had to do, like, with the colors you had to unlock with survival mode, it was so garbage. And then not only that, but like when they try to redeem themselves with like the extra battle stuff, and then they made it to where you had to pay fight money to then do the extra battle to potentially get this extra ticket for the costume, like, oh, like it was so stupid. Like, I'm telling y'all, DOA 6 could never stoop to that level, and it's crazy. Like, in comparison, the game is way better. Not to mention, Dead or Alive 6 has a free version, Dead or Alive 6 Core Fighters, right? And this is important to mention because when we talk about, okay, this game costs $60 or whatever, but there's actually a free version of the game. Like, not every fighting game franchise has a free version of its game for you to try out. And one of the most beautiful things about Dead or Alive with 5 and 6 is that you can just get the free game, and if you only feel like you're going to be playing one character primarily, you can just buy that character and you pretty much have the full game, right? If you think about it from that standpoint, like, Dead or Alive 6 has a pretty lenient testing slash trial, you know, period, right? That you can just kind of play the game and buy each character you want individually if you don't really feel like playing all the characters. Like, that's pretty unique and pretty valuable, I would say, when talking about the cost of these fighting games, you know? So that's kind of huge. And like, when you say, oh, this game is bad or whatever, it's like, well, the game is free, technically. So that's definitely something to mention in the conversation for sure. Because I think a lot of times when people say this is a bad game, they feel as though their money was not worth, or the money isn't worth buying the game. But if the game has a free version, well, you don't really have to buy the game, right? You can play the game for free. And that's huge. That's a huge deciding factor, I would say. So, but yeah, really what I wanted to talk about was, I do think that Dead or Alive 6 is really fun, right? Like, I think the game is really fun. I play it a lot, and between Dead or Alive 5 and Dead or Alive 6, I've played so much, and I play 6 more now, I would say, simply because the online community is a lot more active on 6 than it is Dead or Alive 5. After playing a lot of Dead or Alive 5 and Dead or Alive 6, yes, I enjoyed Dead or Alive 5 more simply because they have tag mode, a lot more content, or all the reasons that I mentioned earlier on in the video. But after playing a lot of both, I can finally say that I think Dead or Alive 6 looks better for the most part. Like, even though I said, yeah, that one stage, the Crimson stage, in 5, I actually like the look of that more than I do in 6. And overall, I do like a lot of the stages and how they look in 5 more, simply because it looks more gritty and it just feels more like raw and serious, as opposed to 6 where things do feel a bit more, I don't know, fabricated or fake, kind of like things almost have a plastic look sometimes, you know what I mean? Mainly in the stages, right? But overall, the character models do look a lot better, you know, and when you see the sweat just dripping from them, it's like, it looks so real and so good, and the colors are so much more vibrant, and things are a lot sharper in 6, and I think the graphics overall just look better in 6 than they do 5. There are a lot of things in 5 that I do think still look better than 6, but overall, if I'm going to be playing the game a lot, I would rather be forced to look at the graphics of 6 than 5. And it's not by much. Like, I think especially for its time, Dead or Alive 5 is still one of the best looking games ever made, and with how smooth it runs, right? But when you have those intros in 5 and they're not 60 FPS versus 6's intros where they are 60 FPS for the intro and outro and everything, not that it's a huge deal or anything, but it is the small things, right, that I would say overall graphically the game does look a little bit better. You know, you can just tell by those small things, right? But I do think that if 6 had more content, I would probably enjoy 6 more. 5 I enjoy more by a landslide because of the content, but I do think that if 6 had more content, I would enjoy it more, because yeah, 6 is a lot of fun. I feel like people don't say it enough, but yeah, Dead or Alive 6 is a fun game. So I kind of wanted to just make this video, get my thoughts out there, and try to stop this stigma that 6 is a bad game, because again, it's not a bad game when you look at how bad fighting games can be. It's just, I think the DLC and the way the support was handled post-launch was really dirty, and the way that they just handled most of the content in the game was just really dirty. But there's still some highlights of 6, and there's still things I really love about 6. How they made it a lot more accessible when it comes to its fighting mechanics. You know, the break hold and break blow system, I think, was a really welcome addition, honestly. And you know, I'll talk a little bit more about the mechanics in my Dead or Alive reboot video, where I talk about the mechanics we would like to see stay and leave. So guys, definitely check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Thank y'all so much for listening and watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys like this video, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe, turn notifications on. I do love me some fighting games, and I do love me some DOA, so yeah, you can check out all my DOA videos in the playlist that's gonna show up right after the end of this one. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video.